School Committee for Monday, April 6, 2015. Mrs. Kennedy, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Sweeney?
Present.
Mr. Cole?
Here.
Mrs. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Lucan?
Here.
Mayor Holiday?
Present.
Ms. McCarthy?
Here.
Mr. Min?
Present.
Thank you. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This brings us to a section of our meeting called public comment. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the school committee, could you please step forward, state your name and address, and try to keep your comment to about 2 minutes. I do believe we are entertaining a second public comment session after the superintendent goes over the budget for us. So there will be 2 opportunities this evening to address the school committee, this being the first. Is there anyone with a public comment at this time that would like to be heard? Yes.
Ralph Orlando, 4 William Hall Drive. You can ask me anytime you want. As always, I want to preface what I'm going to say by saying I'm speaking to the elected officials of the school committee and those individuals only. It wasn't too long ago in this room when we heard accolades for the SIP at the Newburyport High School, how it served as a model for the other schools in the district, how it really looked at what needs improvement in the high school. Well, by the same law that governs the SIPs, the school councils at each individual school are required to review the school budgets at those individual schools before a school committee presentation. This is the first time that I've seen the budget in real numbers. And there are other people here who can refute what I say. That being said, I want to offer some commentaries to the school committee. Your policy of silence is unacceptable and shameful. Your no surprises code of conduct is unacceptable and shameful to me. And the non-transparency of this whole process, which to some of the senior members of this committee who have been here for longer than I have, which is now 10 years, know what I'm talking about. I want to tell everybody in the room, granted, a lot of you are stacked here because you work for the district. I've been coming to these for 10 years and I've never seen this room as full as it is tonight. So something's going on. And I don't know about it. But I, as a member of the high school council, should have known something about it. And so as far as the high school is concerned, especially since this district has received in the last year over $50 million to every school but the high school, before any dime is spent on anything else, you need to put 5 teachers in the high school. I'll give you the middle school 5th grader. I listened to that presentation very sympathetically. But before any dime is given to any other school in the district, you got to secure the high school, just like the other schools in the district. And there's one other thing, unfortunately, that I'm forgetting. And if anyone out there from the council can tell me, I'd appreciate it, because I don't usually operate off cards. So I don't know what got you all here. I come all the time. But there's been no transparency to what's going to be discussed tonight. Matter of fact, I was surprised to even see it on the agenda because I was waiting for the high school council to meet and review the actual numbers so that we could prioritize for you what our SIP was all about, because we don't have any say as a school council in what is approved. But I would hope to God that you people would want to hear what our priorities were when it comes to the schools. And the last thing, as I recall now, is the technology at the high school needs some replacement. And before we talk about a district technology plan, the district just received about $2 million for the other new building projects. The high school needs some computers before. It's the Newburyport High School technology plan that I want you to address. And as always, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? Hearing none, we'll move into our agenda. Thank you. Consent agenda. Mr. Menon, do we have warrants, please?
We have warrants, and we have no conflicts, but just if I could briefly before we do that, as usual, when we have a member of the Boy Scouts here who's working on a merit badge, I'd like to introduce them. We have a young man by the name of Trevor Cody who's here tonight. He's working on his Citizenship in the Community merit badge. The merit badge requires that they understand how city government works. I've told him he's come to a great meeting tonight to see how government works. So, Trevor, welcome, and hope you do well on the badge.
He's hiding.
Did I embarrass him enough?
Yeah.
Good. I move. We do have warrants. There are no conflicts. I move that the following named bills of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate of $45,265.44 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I have a second warrant. I move that the following named bills of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate to $240,560.17 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment. There are no conflicts on this one either.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Second motion carries. I'd like to turn your attention now to the Newburyport, Newburyport School Committee Business Meeting minutes of Monday, March 16th. Could I hear a motion, please? So moved. Could I hear a second? Discussion? Changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes carry. Next on our agenda is our Clipper representative, Julia Bradley. How's the high school doing?
It's getting pretty busy, actually, right
Uh-huh.
now in the spring. So April 2nd is junior prom. March 31st was the National Honor Society induction ceremony. Tomorrow is the Credit for Life Fair for the juniors. And then tomorrow night, it's also the Newburyport Wisdom to Prejudice Forum at the Knock. The NHS play The Dining Room starts tonight in the park. Senior Books at Home projects are due on Friday as well. The 14th is the National Art Honor Society induction ceremony. And the No Talent Talent Show will be on the 13th. So we're going to split the profits for the senior student councils to split the profits. Then for sports, basketball and softball are very busy the next 3 weeks. There's a lot of games.
Where are they practicing?
I'm not sure.
I think indoors, and they're
I think so. Right.
trying to raise money. I opened the door to two lovely young ladies looking for donations for the teams, so thank you. Are you going to be in the talent show?
Yes.
And what are you going to do?
Haven't decided yet. I'm gonna think
It's the
about
kind of show we can decide at the last minute.
it. Yeah.
Thanks, Julia.
Thanks, Julia.
Now I'm going to turn the next session of this meeting over to the superintendent.
Before
and
that, you have a use of facilities request.
I do.
Request.
Yeah, facilities request.
All right, thanks. It's not on here.
It's right here.
I got it.
Got it?
Yes, sorry, it's not in my original notes. We have someone here to speak about,
Can you speak up? The crowd is large, there's very few of us in the back of the room, not only being in the desk.
thank you. We have a request before us for use of facilities. Is Kim Spinney here?
She's
No.
not, but this has come before the school committee
Yeah.
previously.
I hope all is well. I think school committee members have this. Do you have this letter, or would you like me to read it?
I don't have it. If you'd read it, that'd
Thank
be
you.
great.
I hope all is well. I'm wondering if you can help out with the following schedule issues we run into yearly regarding the use of the Fuller Field track for our group, the Newburyport Junior Clippers Special Olympics track team. The track may only be used from 1 to 5 on Sundays per vote of the school committee. Presently, Newburyport Lacrosse has reserved the use of the track on Sundays from 1 to 5 for the length of the season. We hold practice on Sundays because most of the volunteers that support our athletes are high school students. It is the one day of the week that they have the least amount of scheduled extracurricular activities of their own. I was hoping you could put forth a request to the school committee. This is written to Susan Vaccaro. I was hoping that you could put forth a request to the school committee on our behalf to extend the use of the track to accommodate our group. We would like to use the track on Sundays from 5:30 to 6:30, April 12th through June 7th. The school committee has been very helpful in granting us an extended use of the track and field space in the past. To my knowledge, this time extension has never posed a problem. I was hoping that you'd be able to put this matter on the agenda for the upcoming April 6th meeting. I connected with Bob Clark, who I think is here.
Yes, he is. Mr. Clark is here.
And he's fine with us using the track, provided the time is approved by the school committee. If you need any further information about our group, I would be happy to provide it. So could I hear a motion, please?
I would happily move that the school committee consider granting this request to use the field the additional hour and a half beyond.
Second. Discussion? Mr. Cole?
Yeah. Why does lacrosse have such a ownership of that time slot? How did they get that?
I don't know the answer to that. I would turn to...
Mr. Clark, do you know the?
That lacrosse, that question, to meet all of the needs in the community. Lacrosse, for the past 4 years, I've seen their numbers grow dramatically. So they actually use the fields at the middle school on Saturday, on Sundays. They just use the field inside of, full field. That's the space that they use. And they also have an increase in their younger kids, so I think they're going to possibly use the backfield a little, but really they play their games with their older kids on Sundays during that time. This has been, again, with the limited field space and trying to accommodate all the needs. I think in the past 3 years, and speaking with Kim, I believe they used that Sunday time slot.
Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we're on to the budget. Sorry, I didn't have that item on my
I'm going
sheet.
to ask Mrs. Lysak to come up and join me. Trade places. While we are getting this set up, I'd just like to share with the school committee as well as the members of the public who are here tonight. We employed the same budget process this year that I did last year, which was the process where I asked all of the building administrators and my central office team to bring forward a budget that they thought they needed, and that was our starting point. So we have been working on the budget for a number of months, and I just want you to understand that that is our starting point. What is it that building principals and central office members feel that they need in order to move us forward? Now, as many of you know, and you've heard me state before, over the last 10 years, there have been over 80 positions that have been lost in the Newburyport Public Schools. Now, clearly, we are down to 3 physical plants and 4 schools right now. We don't need as many positions, so there was never any intention of thinking that we had to put 80 positions back. However, we do need more staffing, and that really was what predicated the budget that was developed this year. Initially, I started out with about a 7.1% increase in the budget, which you're going to see. But I want to give you a little bit of history to start off with. I'd like you to take a look at the 5-year history. And you'll see that there's variability depending upon what line item you are looking at. Our choice balance, obviously, is down $100,000 based on the number of students that we've had in choice. Our circuit breaker has been up and down, as has our choice tuition. You can see at one point that we were well over $1 million. The federal and state grants that we have received, you are also going to see that those are declining significantly. When we take a look at overall in all of our grants, over a 5-year period, we're down by about $600,000. We had almost $1.5 million, and now we're down to just under $1 million. We are fortunate that we have the Swayze Fund as well as the Newburyport Education Foundation. Both have contributed significantly to the district over the last 5 years in terms of professional development, as well as technology needs, literacy needs, and a variety of other endeavors. And that is just a tribute to both organizations and the commitment of the community to support these organizations. Now, I approached this as wanting to present to the school committee, as well as the public, sort of a 3-year view. I wanted people to see where it was we wanted to go as a school district. So what I've done is I've presented to you what we want to do in 15-16, 16-17, and 17-18. Now, what I will tell you is that based on my meeting with the mayor and her finance team last week, we needed to scale back from 7.1 down to about 4%. So what I have done is we have moved things that we had planned to put in the 15-16 budget into the 16-17 budget and move things out that way. But what I'd like you to notice is that we're looking, if you look at 16-17, you can look at how we're trying to build. We have a math interventionist, if you will, in 16-17 that's going to be at Mullen. We're doing that half-time. We would build another half into it the following year. So we're trying to be very strategic about the types of increases. So we're starting out small and we're building so that eventually we're building capacity. And you'll see that all the way through, that's exactly how the leadership team has approached this. We've identified the things we absolutely have to have this year. But we also have had to trade and do some trade-offs for cutting some staff for this year, which you're going to see in a minute, in order to achieve the things that we need to do. And you will notice, and I want to point out in particular, the high school level, beginning to put a business department back at the high school, adding a .8 guidance person due to the change in schedule so that we can support the internships and that our students will now have an opportunity to participate in. We also have added in a half-time nurse, which is definitely needed. The other thing that you will see in this budget a little later on is I have $50,000 worth of money for security at the high school. The high school is the only place that doesn't have a buzz-in system, and I would like to rectify that to bring it in line with both other schools. You may want to come back to this, but so staff reductions in order to bring in the things that we needed. We need a 5th grade teacher. We needed some teacher assistance based on our early intervention numbers and the children we know are coming in. These are areas that we have cut. You'll note that in the technology, we have cut our tech integrators by 0.2 at both Bresnahan and Middle Moline. I have added them back in for the following year because I know that we need full-time tech integrators. You'll also see that we've added a tech integrator to the high school in the future. Again, we had to get to the number that we needed to get to. There are lots of things that are in this budget that I certainly did not want to cut, but we needed to be able to get to the right number. So that's really what the leadership team chose to do. You will know freshman sports are there. We did reduce the ELL tutor, but there's a teacher in the budget that will meet the needs of our English language learner population. Our total fiscal year budget salaries, $21,697,747 with salaries. Our expenses were $7,311,184. And what I want to say to you is that our salaries were based on an increase, but it also includes degree and lane changes, and that came to just about 3%. So that in itself was a given right off the bat. We have listed for you by school the major categories of each one, which includes your salaries, supplies and materials, breaks it down by equipment, athletics, textbooks, software, other administrative costs, and then the actual cost of operating the individual schools themselves. So the high school is at $7,700,000. The middle school is at $4,381,000. Mullen is at $2,700,000. Bresnahan is at $6,096,000. And then the district budget is at $8,066,000. Now, in terms of, you can see the summary, our total request for fiscal year 16 is $29 million. And it breaks down, again, salaries at 21, almost 22. And our expenses are a little bit over $7 million. But the percentage of increase is at, our overall increase is $925,000. And that is a 3.29%. And I'd like to, again, the 2% salaries, which was contracted, plus the steps, is about a 3% overall increase. We also will be going out to bid for a new bus contract. We've built in an additional $36,000 for that. Based on this year's budget, we have added in another $35,000 for both special education and general education legal costs. Security at the high school, as I mentioned earlier, there's $50,000 in the budget for that. And then because of our new building in Bresnahan and also workers' compensation, our insurance costs have gone up about $66,000. In addition, you will recall that last year we put in some contingency money in the following areas. For the school lunch program, there's $40,000 in the proposed budget. There's $15,000 in maintenance, and there's an additional $100,000 in special education. So our overall expenses are $343,000, almost $344,000. And currently, the city gave us a 4% increase, which is what we have just about kept to. We still have about a $34,000 shortfall, but you can see that our revenue was at 3.17% and our total expense was at 3.29. I would ask Angela and or Nancy if there's anything that you want to add. It's pretty straightforward. We may want to go back and take a look at the things that we have, the proposals that we have for increasing in terms of staffing. Maybe go back to that slide.
Yep.
I can talk a little bit more about that. Let's go to the first, yeah. We have, I want to talk about the increases here. The speech, the halftime speech pathologist is there based on the IEPs and the hours that we need. The special education instructional assistants are also based on our early intervention numbers and the knowledge that we have of the students who will be incoming, who will be requiring additional assistance. As I said, we are moving from 8 fourth grades, we need to move to 8 fifth grades. Currently we have 7, so we've added in Mullen teacher there. But I also want to point out a couple of other things. If you look at Bresnahan, for next year, we'd like to be able to add a half-time STEM teacher at Bresnahan, as well as literacy, a .4 media specialist that was cut from this current budget, a special education teacher that was requested for this year, but it would be to enhance and expand the team teaching that we currently have at Bresnahan. We have a .1 of a music teacher, .1 of an art teacher, and .2 of a tech integrator. We have added those things back in. At Mullen, we currently have a .4 STEM teacher. We'd like to add to that another .4 for 16-17, and then we will add the last piece of that, the .2, in 17-18, so we would have a full-time position. We also have a half-time language-based teacher for Mullen that was requested this year, but that we cut in order to get some of the other things that are in the budget. And we also have an adjustment counselor that would serve both Mullen and Knox, that we have moved from the 15-16 school year into the 16-17 school year. You'll also note that we have added an additional Spanish teacher at the middle in Mullen, and that is to begin to build back our foreign language. We wanted to be able to take the foreign language position and for next year to really explore and look at and study our foreign language program across the district and make some good decisions around that, so that we would be able to do that for the 16-17 year. And you'll note in the 17-18 year, we have added another foreign language teacher as well. Go to the next slide. For next year, we're looking at an additional half-time pre-engineering or STEM teacher that would be at Middle Mullen, and also adding back in the tech integrator that we've cut for this year. We also really want to begin to add in a PE position. We have 2 full-time PE teachers at Middle and Mullen, and that's for 900 students. So we really would like to add another PE teacher there, but again, we're doing things incrementally, so we would add 0.5 next year and then 0.5 the following year. It's important to me, for the school committee and for the public and parents and students, to begin to see what the vision is for where we want to go as a school district. And that's the picture that I'm trying to paint for everyone, is letting the public know where we would like to be within a year or within 2 years, and slowly but surely building back some of the things that have been taken out of the budget in previous lean times. The other, at Bresnahan and at Knockmullen, we have the equivalent of 2 full-time nurses. At the high school, where we have 800 students, we do not have enough nursing there. So again, we have added in a half-time nurse. It's actually .3 in Mr. Parent's budget, and it's .2 in a grant, but it begins to build us back to where we need to be. And then lastly, I spoke earlier about the English language learner teacher. We have put a half-time teacher into the budget for this year because we have the numbers of students in which we need to be able to support our English language learner students. So we have a half-time teacher in there. We also had a $5,000 position for a Newburyport Education Foundation liaison, which we took out for this year, but we would put back in for next year. And that is to really help us with the school business partnerships. It's a very part-time position, but it would allow someone to fulfill the role that was previously funded by the Race to the Top grant. Is that correct? So, and those are really sort of the highlights and where we want to go with the budget. Angela and Nancy, I would turn to you and see if you have anything else you want to add, or any member of the leadership team at this point. I don't think so.
I'll add something. I think, this process of looking at a 3-year period is an important one. Because although we weren't able to make the kinds of improvements that we wanted to see this year, at least it keeps all of that in the conversation, and it keeps us looking forward and thinking forward and working towards the growth that the district needs.
I would certainly open it up to any questions at this point. Mrs. McCarthy.
So, so the 4.0 from the city that's the final number. Okay. So we weren't able to level fund with that. We weren't. So we have all of that wish list for the following year. I don't really anticipate next year any more than 4.0. So I feel like that looks great, and I agree, it keeps it in the conversation, but I also feel like it is just a huge pipe dream. I have a question. Adjustment counselor at the middle school will stay a full-time position next year?
Yes.
We're not sharing that.
It is shared between both buildings, yes.
No, it isn't.
Well, not this year.
Not this year.
Right, so
Yeah.
next year,
Yeah.
we're sharing between the two buildings.
No.
No.
Next year, at the middle school, is one adjustment counselor, and she's just at the middle school.
Actually, we have 1.5
Right.
currently.
Okay, we have 1.5.
One position last year was split into 2 half-time positions. Mullen has a .5, they're 2 different people. And Knock has a .5.
So basically, and the Molin's staying the same, even though she had wanted a increase. And then,
So I just want to make sure that I understand. So there is no reduction in personal adjustment counselors at the Knock or Mullen from last year to the year that's coming
No.
in?
so the only thing, I mean, there's a whole lot that I could say. I'm trying to stay calm. But it seemed like there's a lot of reductions in special ed, and I feel like we spent all last year wanting to bring back a huge number of kids to the district. We're gonna build our special ed, we're gonna show the public that we are stable and we're growing, and all I see is we are cutting. And I am really, really concerned about that. I am very, very, very,
I think
very.
proportionally, I think that we have, I think we've done minimally what we needed to do. And I think that, again, overall, when you look at the proportions in terms of regular ed and special ed, I think that it was as balanced as we could be. Would I like to have some things in there? Sure, but again, I mean, I think that we did the best job that we could do in terms of balancing and looking at the needs of students. Again, I think that, you know, we have a couple of elementary teachers who are going to lose positions. That's going to cause our class size to increase. we have cut back on a part-time special ed teacher, but I do think that it was pretty balanced.
I just think we're better than minimal. This is not good enough. It's, a 4.0 is not good enough. It doesn't even level fund what we had last year. And to be truthful, freshman sports, we're really gonna cut freshman sports.
I mean, when we came together as a leadership team, every administrator was asked to go back and look at their budgets and come forward with cuts that they thought they could make. So I did not micromanage. I asked the building principals and the central office team to please come forward with the cuts that they wanted to. So that was not me coming up with freshman sports or
No one can
anything.
hear back here, just so you know. I apologize for speaking out. But if you want to inform the public, maybe you need to stand up and talk. It's not only me.
This microphone.
It's just
Just
for
for cable.
television.
The only thing that draws my attention about the freshman sports is I have a hard time believing that we're actually gonna do that. But I go back to the middle school principal talking at a public meeting about kids at risk and how that groundwork for them dropping out or becoming detached from high school, the foundation's laid at the middle school. So we're honestly gonna tell our 8th grade football team or whatever, you're not playing football next year. Welcome to the high school, you're not playing a single sport, take a year off, we'll see you when you're a sophomore. We're not gonna do that.
That doesn't preclude our 9th graders from trying out for JV or varsity. It doesn't preclude that. Does not preclude
It's
that.
gonna knock out a huge number of kids, because right now, our policy says all freshmen play.
Superintendent, could you stand up when you respond, because we cannot hear you back
Sure.
there.
I simply said that our 9th graders does not preclude them from participating in either JV or varsity if they are selected for that.
But our policy, does our policy not still say that freshmen play?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You can ask Mr. Clark, probably.
The question as far as freshmen playing sports,
Yeah, freshman sports, I thought by policy, freshmen played.
they would participate, the 3 levels, that's what it's described, the freshman sports, we encourage the coaches to play as many students as possible. I think, to Susan's, point, with the cuts, what was proposed, in the fall, there are 3 freshman teams. There's boys soccer, there's football, and there's field hockey, and, it will increase numbers. So what we're looking at is just having a varsity and a sub-varsity, team. That's what it looked like. Is it a perfect scenario? I don't think it's a perfect scenario, because I think athletics is important, I would like to see it, but I understand, where we are with the budget. So, there would be some kids who may be displaced, but we would offer freshmen the opportunity to play. We have large numbers of freshmen who participate in our cross-country team, we have a number of freshmen who participate in, our girls soccer program, and I think if you look at our, our winter and spring sports would be the same, same scenario, but it would be a varsity and a sub-varsity, scenario, which in the Cape Ann League, there are a number of teams who are going through that process as well.
Well, five years ago, in our policy, we had it that freshmen play. And freshmen were not cut, because we actually cut 2 softball players and we had to invite them back. So that wasn't our policy. I'm gonna look at the policy again tomorrow, because we're gonna have to change it if in fact our freshmen aren't gonna have sports. I just really don't believe it, but I'll let someone else talk. Mr. Lipkins?
Can you tell me what the approximate class size impact at the Bresnahan is due to the reduction of 2 full-time elementary school teachers?
We will be 21 in grade 1 and 24 in grade 3, correct?
I believe it's 22 grade 1, 24 grade 3.
Okay, thank you.
Where does that stand right now?
Oh,
Where does that stand right now? What are
the numbers this year?
The numbers are between 18 and 20 for first grade. I believe 19 and 22 second grade, and the same goes for third grade.
So it definitely increases class size.
So in effect, we're increasing class size so that we can lay off teachers, but we're not increasing class size so that we can bring in revenue with choice seats.
We are not increasing choice. Now, as I said, I believe at the last meeting, one of the things that I will be looking at is whether or not we can look at choice and beginning choice in kindergarten in future years so that we could build back up again. That's one of the things that I will be investigating. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a number of questions, actually, if I might. And some comments, which I will try to restrain myself. Obviously, I'm as upset as a number of us are here. I'm upset that this late in the game is when we're hammering some of this stuff out. It's ironic, there's a wonderful movie that's one of my favorites, If You Build It, They'll Come. But I guess if we build fields, if you're a ninth grader, it's questionable whether you're going to be able to get to use those fields. That's very disappointing to me. Ultimately, really what I think it comes down to for me is I've tried to approach this budget process, and I've been through this, and this to me is as appalling and probably more appalling than what we went through in 2007. We dug ourselves a hole in 2007 that we just started to crawl out of last year. And we're now tumbling right back into that hole, which is really, really disappointing. When I see postponing bringing in a guidance counselor or laying off a guidance counselor, or some of these cuts, or adjustment counselors, I'm really concerned. I become very concerned. When I see, again, we haven't talked about stipends disappearing. We have a list from this morning. How does that match up to this list that we've got now?
It's exactly the same.
It's the exact same list.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've been concerned about all of the time that I've been here, because it's an area that I come from professionally, are how are we working with our at-risk students? How are we working with at-risk students? Students that, we had a great presentation here, a very powerful presentation here about a suicide prevention program that we instituted at the beginning of the year, which I applauded. I thought it was long overdue. I was really, really happy to see it. But yet, when I took a look at the list of cuts that were being proposed this morning, I saw critical interventionists being removed. So you've got a suicide prevention program, but if you have a kid who's feeling suicidal, that first level of intervention person may or may not be there based on the budget.
We didn't completely, I don't want anyone to think that we have pulled out our resources at any building. We have not done that.
I'm saying we've cut them back.
We certainly have not done that. And I certainly think that we still are, the Signs of Suicide program is still in the budget. That's still part of what we will be doing.
Right, but when push comes to shove, and keep in mind that, my experience, I have tremendous respect for your educational experience, and you have really helped to teach us a lot here. When it comes to mental health services, that's where I grew up. I lived there. I know that. I spent 5 years talking people off of bridges. I've done that work. So I understand the risk factors. I understand who's at risk, and I understand how you intervene. And it seemed to me, my concern was that those key intervention folks, those adjustment counselors, those guidance counselors, those are key. Those are key interventionists. And I want to make sure that they are, I hate to use the phrase, but held harmless, because the whole school would be held harmless. If these people are being cut back, if we're even pinching back 2 hours or 4 hours or 10 hours out of somebody's schedule, I have real concerns about that, about the impact on student services. You've heard me talk about that. That's nothing new. So that is a concern of mine. And in terms of a rational, thoughtful, intentional budget process, we've had our differences as these budgets have been built. I do respect that these budgets are being built within by the schools, within by the administrators. I have some questions, and these are basic questions. These are questions I need to ask as a school committee member. is this budget built on a reasonable understanding of what last year's actual expenses were? What it cost us last year to run these programs, is that a basis for trying to figure out whether we're running,
Yes.
gonna run the same program? But we're made some serious, I mean, there are cuts that are carving the crap out of some of these things that we're doing.
We had to make changes based on the parameters that were
So,
given to me.
so knowing that it cost X amount of dollars to provide student support services last year, we're still gonna be making cuts this year that are not based on the fact that we can save money here, but we're saving money because we're forced to,
We were
because we don't have the
trading,
revenue.
we were trading some things for sure. I mean, the fifth grade teacher was a have-to. The staffing at the high school was a have-to for me. And I think the leadership team would agree with that. So there were certain things that we knew we had to put into the budget. And, you know, we, as I said to you before, initially we came in at 7.1%. And that was not something that the city was able to do. So we needed to cut back based on that. And that's what we did.
I think it's important to understand that some of the cuts that you see were.
Please stand up so we can hear you.
Sure. I think it's important to understand that some of the cuts that you see were additions to allow us the growth that we know we need to do. So there are a few cuts that are current positions in place, and we're very sorry to have to make those. But the majority of the things that you see on the list were things that we were going to be adding to help us realize
coming out of
our
the
school
seven-
improvement plans, help us realize the growth that we're trying to make. So I just think that's an important point to make, so that when you see a .5 adjustment counselor on the list of not being funded, that was the additional .5 that our principals feel are really important and are very needed, but it's not .5 of the adjustment counselor that's currently in place.
Okay, so some of these are coming off that 7.1%
Yes.
budget, which was the reasonable budget based on the SIPs, based on conversations we've been having over the last year about the direction we're going in, the direction we're building.
Yes.
It was, the 7.1 was based on what principals and central office felt that they needed for next year. So that's.
Right, and I would say as a school committee member, we knew that we were looking at several years in a row of significant asks. We knew that in order to dig out of the hole, we knew that it wasn't just gonna be 1 year we were gonna get an 8% hit. That we were gonna need several years in a row in order to begin to put the schools where we wanted them to be. So you know, that 7.1% is no shock to anybody. I don't believe, it certainly doesn't surprise me, and it's entirely consistent with the way we've been thinking essentially since you got here. That's no surprise. Does this budget align with our goals and mission? Because these are the questions I'm asking myself,
Yeah.
as to whether or not I'm going to vote for a budget. like this.
I would say that we're still headed in the right direction. Does it align completely? No, it does not. And I can't stand here and say that.
And does this budget provide a foundation to build on in terms of, well, I feel stupid asking this question because we've moved so much to next year. You know, before the 1967 war, there used to be an old Hebrew saying, Yerushalayim shel za'av. Next year, when we get to Jerusalem, everything's going to be peachy keen. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. And then in 1967, we got to Jerusalem. And you know something? It wasn't so great. You know, so I'm not one for sort of pushing it off into the future. What sort of understanding, not that we didn't have an understanding this year, but what sort of understanding do we have next year that all these aspirations are going to get past?
I don't think we do. I think that was important to me, and I think to the rest of the leadership team, is that we put out there what we thought we needed. We allow the city to see what it is we are aspiring to be, and that we put that out there. That was important to me, It was important to lay the vision of here's where we want to go over time. I'm a realist here in that I understand we can't do everything at once, which is why there are incremental pieces of staffing in the budget. I understand that we can't do everything at once.
From where I sit, it's been 8 years crawling out of the hole that we put ourselves in. So I don't see this as, getting this one-time hit 1 year, if you add it to those 7 years, it suddenly becomes pretty reasonable. It becomes a pretty reasonable amount. I think that this budget, unfortunately, is a step backwards. I don't think this is a treading water budget. I think that this budget has some serious impacts on the kids, on faculty, on administration, on our mission, on our goals, on our hopes and our dreams. And that's not to say that you didn't work hard on this budget. That's not to say that your hands aren't tied. I get that. It's not acceptable budget to me. It's not acceptable budget to me.
I do think that we move forward in some cases. I think adding some staff back to the high school, but I also do think that there are some areas where we move backward. So I would agree with you on that. But again, this was the budget that we could put forward, given the parameters that I was given, and still trying to move us forward incrementally.
I would say that I haven't gotten information here that brings me to a point of being comfortable voting for this budget moving forward, because I just simply don't think it reflects well on our district. And I'm very open to conversation about what else we can do, but I appreciate it, but I'm disappointed, deeply disappointed.
Yeah, actually, this will be my last statement, but, we went to the taxpayers and we sold them on a new school and a new renovation, and I think that we led them to believe that our state-of-the-art, 21st century window dressing schools were gonna be just that on the inside. And I think that we've taken many steps back. And I feel like we can't partner with the community now because we then additionally bonded money for fields. And I remember at the time, I warned people, we may need the support of our community on some very critical needs. Think twice about taxing them and having them dig as far into their pockets as they did for the fields. I think that we're actually there. I don't think going to the community is at all an option, and I don't find this budget acceptable, and I can go on record right now as telling I am not voting for it.
Susan, can I ask you please a couple questions? I'm looking specifically at the system-wide budget page. And I'm noticing that some contingencies that we have built in for budget stabilization are, I could say, pretty drastically reduced in some cases, and I don't think I'm overspeaking. So I'm looking at, for instance, system-wide, first item on that, under that is sick leave. We had a contingency of $40,000. I believe last year we had to raise that contingency and put more money into that account because we had overspent it. Now we're cutting.
Where are you?
I'm sorry, I am on.
You're on the document?
Yeah, I'm in here. Yeah. I don't know where I'm through.
As long as I know you're.
I'm looking at the contingency for lunch, which we know we've had to borrow on for the past 2 years in a row. The latest was $25,000 additional dollars that the city council voted on Monday evening. I see that contingency is gone. I don't know, could you please help me, what is our current contingency in special education and what is gonna happen to that next year?
Contingency for school lunch is still at $40,000. We were originally at $50 this year, and that was what we were hoping for again next year. as we are using the 50,000 this year, and we have a new contract next year. We have to go out to bid.
Right.
But that was decreased by $10,000. It now remains at 40. The other contingency that was
And
cut was maintenance.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's at 40, but last year we spent 50, and this year we're spending at least 50.
Yep.
Okay, so that's an under budget right there, and we absolutely know it.
Could be. It depends on who gets the new contract, but yes, entirely possible that it will be, yeah.
And special education?
Special education has a contingency of $100,000. It may be a little higher. There's one child that we...
And that's still left for next
That remains
year?
in the budget, yes.
And what was it last year?
It was probably about 150 last year.
So there's another contingency cut there.
Yep.
So if our budget needs are in trouble, we don't have any place to go. We have no nest egg, we have nowhere to go, except the city council to beg for more money, when we already know we can't fund our needs. In some of these cases, I would like to hear specifically from Mr. Parent of the vitality of what's left in his budget. I know that we asked for students to sign up for classes early so we could anticipate, he could build a SIPs, he could build his budget. Where are we with that? I would like to hear the ramifications from the high school. Being a classroom teacher myself for over 30 years, I have a real problem with class sizes in grade 1 and grade 3 as high as we're gonna ask for them to be. It makes a huge amount of difference when you're talking about early intervention. We know that our MCAS scores at the 4th grade level are not where we want them to be. And now we're cutting teachers at the elementary level and increasing class size. So I've got a problem with that. Just a small example perhaps for the public. Tell me about PE at the elementary school. How many students does the PE teacher have?
I would look to Karina for that.
For 1 to 3, or K to 3, we have 2.44 right now, and we service about 600 kids.
And what is that at Molden?
At Mullen and Knock has shared PE teachers, 2 PE teachers that service about 800 students.
So we have teachers currently with a caseload of 400 children.
Yes.
Yes.
Again, as an educator, I'm having trouble here. I really am. I know that this is the 3rd, I believe, iteration of this budget. It's gone through what you and the leadership team worked really, really, really hard to deliver is a budget that gave us some growth, and it was 7.1%. And I understand that is a large number, but I am very concerned that we're moving backwards. I just am very concerned at all of this, and the level of cuts we're at again. We've been here before, we've sat here before. This is not something that I'm comfortable with. I didn't get elected to do this kind of a job to the school district, I didn't. And I think that somehow, and I don't know where we go from here, I don't know what the answer is, I don't know how we can get around some of this. We're 3% apart, and the mayor said, that's it, there's no more. I'm really concerned about our school district.
Could I ask Mr. Parent to just talk about the additions to the high school and how we sort of followed that process of doing scheduling early, adding in the business, and just talk a little bit about that?
In my school improvement plan, I came to you and said we wanted to reestablish a business department at the high school. My goal was a .6 teacher. We reduced it down to .4. I do have students who have signed up for marketing and for business, that classes that we can run next year. Additionally, we were looking for additional staff to move in different areas. We did change the schedule. One of the key ingredients to that was to have a vibrant internship program, which, for where we currently sit with our guidance department, I needed another guidance counselor so I could free one of the current counselors, Cheryl Zano, to go back to doing what she does best, which is overseeing that internship program and not having a caseload that prevents her from doing her job to the best of her ability. Our current scheduling process, we put on hold. We did a lot of work from January to 1st of March to have students sign up, to do all of our waiver meetings and move everything forward. The thing that I can't do right now is create a budget without knowing exactly what my staffing is going to be next year. If I do that now, I will create as much work as we just went through the last 3 months fixing the schedule, because if students can't get the classes they signed up for, we've got to move them in somewhere else. And that can create a myriad of problems as far as scheduling, because we could have classes now that may have 20 per student, 20 in a class, blow out to 35, 40 if we have to move large numbers of students because we don't have the staff. And so until I'm really comfortable with where we are staffing-wise at the high school, I can't tell Judy to start creating, scenarios for our schedule for next year until I'm more comfortable where we are as far as staffing.
When you say more comfortable, do you mean what what is the? Can I ask what the impact of the budget as proposed to us tonight is? What does that mean? If nothing gets added to this budget, what does that mean for your scheduling? What does that mean for students? What does that mean for your business program? What does that mean?
We will have a schedule. We'll have business classes. We will have other classes. I stand in front of you with freshman sports, being a coach for 25 years. I can't tell you how much that hurts. Okay, sitting next to this man, we both have lived athletics our entire life. I can't sit here and say that cutting a .2 English is going to better the high school. It's not. And if I can bring something back in my budget that is currently off the table, it's going to be that English position.
What does that mean in terms of? What does that mean in terms of classes? That .2 means how many classes, how many students served?
It means increasing the size of classes from anywhere from freshman year to senior year. We have not sat, like Testa and I have not sat with the department heads and figured out sections yet, because again, what's preventing us from doing that is knowing exactly where our staffing is. I mean, I'm adding a math teacher. Okay, I wanted to add a .4, we cut back to .2. That's going to have an impact on the number of sections that we're going to offer in our math department. So again, until I have a real clear sense of where we are, then we will create the budget.
What does a .2 represent in terms of the number of sections a .2 can teach?
It represents a one section, and that may not seem like anything great in the grand scheme of things, but one section.
Like it seems great in the grand scheme of things to me.
It means a lot, because that .2 is what I can use to say, okay, my junior class, which is my biggest class next year, has the most students in English. I can create another section of English with that .2. Not having it next year, I don't have that opportunity to have that variable that I currently have.
So if this budget were to not change at all, then you're looking at expanded class size, you're looking at reductions in the number of sections that are available, you're looking at not being able to offer some things that you had hoped to offer and might even have put on the schedule to offer. Is that all that accurate?
It could mean looking at some things that way. Again, we have preliminary numbers from our students, the data, we have all that. It's just knowing how many FTEs do we have, how many sections in each department do we have, what's my staffing going to look like, and then once we know that and plug in how many sections of each each class we need in each department, we can then run a schedule. And the worst thing we can do is run a schedule now, and then have to adjust it 3 or 4 times between now and
And I'm not suggesting that you run the schedule now, I'm
just saying
asking
that
for an
that's why the
assessment.
scenario's pretty much on hold, unfortunately.
It's one of the reasons why I spoke to the school committee early on, back in probably November or December, and said, we're gonna move the scheduling process up, and what you can't do is you can't say yes to doing all that and then pull back, because it puts us in exactly the type of position that Mike's talking
No,
about.
I understand that, I'm just trying to get a better understanding of what that position is.
It's a grind to a halt to a process that was moving faster than we've ever moved before, to get to a point where we would have hard data to move forward to create a schedule so that, and Ralph knows from our, talks on the school council, okay, was to get students to have a schedule before they leave this particular school year. Every day that we're kind of in limbo, the odds of having that completed by the end of the school year, when they were going to the end of June, diminishes each day. Because we are gonna have schedule conflicts. Students are not gonna get every class they sign up for, whether I get all my staffing or some of my staffing. And those are the one-on-one conversations that we need to have with students who have to make sometimes some tough choices depending on the nature of what the schedule looks like.
Mr. Parent, may I ask you, this was the first thing you spoke of, from a point 6 to a point 4?
That was a business, business point 6.
Mr. Parent, what does this do to AP chemistry at the high school, which I know we were hoping to?
We will have an AP chemistry class next year.
One
We have
section?
20 students signed up, so it'll be one section.
So that is all set?
That's in the budget.
Okay.
It's in
Thank
the
you.
budget, along with 2 aquaponics classes, which will be a new elective at the high school. So there are enough students there that have signed up for that class to move forward. So it's not like we are not adding some things, just that we're adding things in one column and we're reducing things in some other areas to try to make it all work.
And I think that's important for us to understand, that you're moving within a certain budget limitation and doing the best you can do to put the biggest bang for the buck. But, Mr. Decanter? Thank you.
Yep.
I have a couple of questions. First, Superintendent, if you can explain to me or support the concept of hiring a part-time teacher to complement them into a full-time year after year. Where is the wisdom in doing that on a step basis?
Again, it is just building it incrementally is the thought process. It's a successful strategy that I used in my previous superintendency, and it builds incrementally. And obviously, if you're hiring a half-time person, you are spending half the salary versus a full-time salary. So that's the reasoning behind it, is just to build incrementally, to eventually get where you want to go, and to not take as much of a major hit on a budget by hiring full-time positions. And that's typically, particularly at the high school, that's how positions have been built here. It's been done, 0.2, 0.4, 0.6.
Do we get the best possible quality when we hire part-time teachers, or do we find that it makes more sense to hire people who can depend on their teaching job for a living and dedicate themselves entirely to it?
Again, in my limited experience here in the last 2 years, what I can tell you is that I think that we have been very fortunate in the folks who have come forward, either for part-time or for full-time positions. So I think that we have hired well in Newburyport. I don't know, Angela, if you want to respond to that, but we haven't had difficulty filling positions.
I think I join my colleagues that have spoken thus far in expressing my disappointment, my concern, perhaps even my absolute horror. Because amongst the things that we're cutting or are limiting it's not just full-time classes. We're really beginning to dig at some of the things that we hold dear and hold as critical tenets of the way we do education here. We're cutting out stipends for the Drama Fest. Any high school student that has gone through Drama Fest will tell you that that has been one of the stellar educational experiences of their high school career. We don't have support for chorus. Chorus, my friends, is applied mathematics. It's not music, it's applied mathematics. And we can't support it. We say we want well-rounded students, and oh, let's cut freshman sports. Yes, we'll be able to shove more people onto JV, which means we're going to have many more bench sitters. And while, yes, students like to get to practice, they're in it for the game. Let's not kid ourselves. They like that game day. They like getting dressed up in their uniform and going out and competing against other kids. And that's the kind of things that we're, I wouldn't call it cutting, we're shaving away. We have shaved away so much that our system is bleeding. There's nothing left there but bones. And we are kidding ourselves into saying, oh, aren't we lucky we're going to be able to go above the 2.5% the Prop 2.5 allows us to do and go to 4%. And yes, we are lucky that we're able to do that. There are districts I know that don't do that. I guess my question, and this goes to the mayor and to the city council, is this. Since Prop 2.5 has been implemented, have we passed an override in the city of Newburyport? Have we? No.
Debt exclusion votes.
No, I didn't ask debt exclusion.
It's all part of the
Override.
same.
Override for operations. Debt exclusions cannot be used. I know that the city side of things are no better than the school side of things. I know I'm a resident in Newburyport. I know that I went through the whole storm time that we had there. My street got plowed once. You know what? We may do with it, and we will make do with it. But we are not in a position, I don't think, to continue to make do with the future of our kids. We need to find the way to get back way closer to that 7.1% than we are right now. And I know we're not going to be in a position to pass an override between now and the next 3 weeks, but we need to have some kind of a commitment from all of us as a community that we're going to find a way, if we can't make it work for this year, that all of these things that are on the reds and these columns that are at or putting off till next year, we've got some security that we're going to be able to put in there. Right now, I join Audrey in saying, I've got no reason to believe that this is going to happen. And I think right now, we have got to go and aggressively pursue what we need for our kids. We've got wonderful schools now. Buildings in which we have art rooms, so we can do art properly. Oh, but we don't have enough teachers to really do it. We're overcrowding our classrooms. We're increasing our class size at the elementary school where it matters most. Forget about the high school, where we're increasing our class size to the point where they don't even fit in the classrooms for certain basic courses, because that's the only way we're going to be able to offer it. These are required courses. And Mike Parent and his team are doing a great job, but you know what? The pressure's on there. And if things don't fall exactly right, somebody's going to say, I couldn't take that chemistry AP course because the only English section I could go into was this one, unless I wanted to be in a class of 40 kids. This is what we're playing with. This is not sound educational policy. And I know that the superintendent put together, and I applaud her for that 7.1 plan, which in my book probably should be somewhere around 8 to 8.2. But that 7.1 plan was reasonable. It did the kinds of things we needed to do. We moved ahead for our kids. And we're pulling back from that because the money's not there. Okay, that's a reality, a fiscal reality of our situation today. But I need to know from the mayor what kind of security, Mayor, do we have that next year we're going to be able to fund these things, since we're identifying them now?
Well, I don't know that we have the security at this point. We have a new administration. We have a new administration that came in that was facing we have I don't know if that we have that kind of security that we can present forward to you at this point. We received, in terms of revenues, we have a new administration that came in facing a terrible deficit that they had to cover. In addition, the increases in our local aid and our Chapter 70 were minimal. Overall, when we look at our revenue picture, it's an additional $2 million is what we end up with additional revenues this year. Guess what? The school's getting $1 million of that, a little over $1 million of that. So that's the best we could do this year in terms of that. When the city budget is done, and I have for you here, that I'd like you to take a copy of this. You'll see one is a summary of the city side budget and a summary of our revenues. And so for each of you here, if you could take that, and you'll see that when the budget is done, based on the 4% for the schools, we have $21,000 left in the budget. And that's all. There is just no additional revenue. Our state rep was here a moment ago from CalCourse, but I think he hears the status that we're talking about in terms of, even if they could give us back the $25 per student that they did last year. We had Speaker DeLeo at the mayor's meeting last week and talked to him about that. We talked a lot about the increases in special education costs. Grateful to Senator Ives for the work that she's doing in that area and some of the legislation that she's put forward. But you know how long it takes to get bills through the legislature in terms of relief. Look at the total budget summary for the city side. Granted, there's a couple bumps in there, but that's because positions were moved from one, like the treasurer, to HR. So, there are no significant increases in the city side budget. So it's not like there, was additional money that could be transferred to the schools. We did the best we could at 4%. Last year, we had better revenue, so we were able to do the higher amount.
Mayor, let me clarify that in my comments, I'm not in any way suggesting that we're not getting a fair shake from you or from the city council. What I am suggesting is that as a community, we need to come face to face with the reality that in the over 20 years that we've had, or however long we've had Prop 2.5, we have not given ourselves a raise to operate our city that is anywhere near the rate of inflation. Our city side, I'm sure, Mayor, you are feeling exactly the same pressures and frustrations that we are feeling on the school side. But people, I think it's time we get our head out of the sand and say, hey, we have got to correct our citywide revenue issues. And it's not going to happen because Charlie Baker is or is not in office. We have never depended that much on the state. It would be wonderful if we did, but that hasn't been our position. Our fiscal and financial position has been, we've basically self-funded what we need to get going. And that is still the case. And so I just say we need to look to ourselves and say, the only way that we're going to have to move forward with this is to take a look at our city operating budget and what it should be. Schools, public works, the whole bit. Because I can't imagine that people in City Hall are finding a much more comfortable position than we are. And that is ultimately what it comes down to. We are slicing and scratching and moving the budget so many ways that we're backing ourselves into a position where nobody wants to be any further. And I guess that is why right now, without other plans or at least discussions in place, I find it very hard to support this kind of a budget.
May I ask, I understand that we sold the Kelly School for $750,000.
Not yet.
Are you still intending to turn that money to the schools? I believe you had promised us that at the beginning of the year.
No, I said, I didn't promise, I said I would try to look into setting up that. Unfortunately, state law requires that you use that funding to pay down debt. So, but we can do the shell game, you know, you pay down debt with that, then you move the money over to someplace else. We also, you know, that's not very much money and it's one-time funding.
Well,
And it won't happen for at least another year.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Cole?
Yeah, I guess a few things strike me about the revenue outlook for FY16. And I'll try to tie that into the point I'd like to make. But it really started in 2003 when I believe it was Governor Romney at that time cut public school transportation reimbursement in a 20% cut to Chapter 70 at that time. We moved ahead and found a way to charge transportation fees to sustain bus service in our public schools. We've gone on and gradually the state has built back Chapter 70, but we all could use more of that. As I look at the revenue projections for this year, or FY16, I see a couple areas of loss. I see choice tuitions down by $86,000. I see circuit breaker reimbursement for extraordinary special ed costs down $31,000. I see projections for kindergarten revolving down $50,000. I see preschool revolving down $40,000. If you add all that, that's about $200,000. Wouldn't it be great if we had a way to backfill losses like that? Because frankly, we don't. And a number of years ago, we did have a revenue task force that met extensively, put together a lot of recommendations as to how we could bring money into the school district. And I guess besides looking at these areas and trying to find ways of, okay, is there a way to increase our choice tuition? Is there a way to better gauge kindergarten and preschool projections? But more importantly, is there a better way? Is there a way to sustain education in Newburyport in the long term? And I see some type of mechanism needed to backfill those shortfalls. And I'm pleased a couple city councils, at least a couple city councils a year, maybe three? Four, thank you, sorry, are here because I think one of the objectives we have in Newburyport is to find a way to sustain education in the long term. And I'd invite those, I know we had a couple of members in the audience here involved with the Revenue Task Force. I would invite a relook at that work to see if there's anything we can do to maybe close the gap a little in this budget year. But as I look at that $200,000, that's a significant amount of money right there. And if those are all level, we'd be looking at even less of a gap to deal with, and we might be able to provide some things that we all want our children and students to have in Newburyport. Thank you.
Anything further from the committee? Mr. Bennett?
Again, I trying to, not one necessarily for logic, I tend to go with my gut more, but I'm trying to look at it logically, and the first thing that I notice when I look at these 3-year staffing needs are that everything that's in the middle column is stuff we could use right now, essentially. I mean, we could use it right now. And then I look at the stuff that's in the middle column, and I try to think about, you know, how we've really tried very hard to move towards a differentiated approach to the education, to be able to reach kids where they are as opposed to funneling kids to where we need them to be so that we think we can teach them. And we've really worked very, very hard at that. And then I look at the Bresnahan, I look at half a STEM teacher, and I think of those kids that are on fire for science, those kids that just can't get enough of that stuff. But they won't get enough of that stuff this year. That's maybe next year if we're lucky. Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, maybe we'll get there. I look at literacy, and I think it's some of the most vulnerable kids that we've got, the ones who are at greatest risk. I look at a media specialist. You know, I'm looking here at a SPED teacher. Again, some of these most vulnerable kids, we know that the earlier we intervene, the more likely we are to not only help these children, but lower the costs of special education services as they progress through our school system. I look at an art teacher and I think of these, I mean, look at this room. I think of these really creative kids who are learning how to do this amazing stuff that I can only admire, because I can't do that stuff. That's not the medium that I can work in. And I look at a tech integrator, and I think of kids putting things together. I look at a music teacher. I mean, this is the heart and soul, really, of what we are. These are our goals. These are our aspirations. And this ain't happening this year. Maybe if we're lucky next year. Maybe if we're not so lucky the year after that. But meanwhile, this is what we believe. This is what we've tried to do. So again, I whether it's the Revenue Task Force revisiting some of the things that we might not have tried, or continuing to, you know, turn stones over and look at things, or generate or lobby or advocate, whatever it is, we need to move this number and move it in ways that are significant. That doesn't mean significant in terms of the amount of dollars, but we need to generate additional dollars so that we can have a significant impact, strategically used, on the coming school year with these kids. And I strongly support that. And again, mark me down as somebody who doesn't support this budget as it's currently configured. I understand why it's configured the way it is. I understand where we need to go and what we need to do. But there's a long time between now and when we have to spit this budget out. And I really think that there's a lot of work to do. And I'm ready to do whatever I need to do. But the budget that we see tonight is not going to be a budget that I'm going to be able to vote for. So it's going to have to change for me.
Susan, can I ask you the total number of staff cuts?
In
7% budget?
FTE or in money?
FTE, both.
Can we break it down into the cuts that are off the 7.1% budget and the actual cuts that we're cutting into the budget as it currently exists?
It's about 328,000 in terms of the actual dollar amount. And we're looking at...
It's 5.9 plus the ELL tutoring additions.
Thank you.
Now, those are off of the 7% budget, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we have, will that take us lower by any number versus what we have this year?
Not all of those cuts are off the 7% budget either.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
I think we're trying to figure out of the number of FTEs we currently are providing, what does that look like next year? And again, so are we below? Will we have fewer staff next year than we have this year?
No.
Just different.
No, they're just configured differently.
That's useful information.
They're configured differently. What's up?
So how is the first grade and the third grade teacher cut
It's an estimate, it's not
reconfigured?
exact, but it's pretty close.
So we actually
Increased class size?
Yes.
So we actually are increasing we're going from 343 staff members up to about 357, but that's also includes pieces of people. But we needed to reconfigure differently based on the needs that we had.
Based on most The most, I mean, it's fair to say
Okay.
based on, I don't want to quibble, but it's
Let me
based to
correct
say
that.
on the most compelling needs.
Let's try the new
And
one.
not just the needs.
Okay, that
was
was
on the
incorrect.
original.
That was incorrect. That was the original. That was how much we would have increased. Okay? We're going from 343.1 to 347.1, so it's an overall increase of 3 FTEs, full-time equivalents.
There were trade-offs made
Yes.
based on need.
And could I ask Angela how this has impacted professional development?
Well,
Since we built a calendar around it and,
I think there's going to be a significant impact because what you're seeing are numbers, what we've talked about tonight is staff numbers, basically. But behind all of that is significant cuts made to professional development, supplies and materials, contracted services, all of those things that feed our continuous growth. We had to cut large percentages of those budgets to make that happen. So
can you talk a little bit more specifically about that?
well, for example, in the district-wide curriculum budget, we cut $40,000 in professional development to help get us here. We cut another $30,000 in contracted services, which is all related to professional development. So it's a large impact, and what I will do is make every effort to recover some of that through grants in any way that I can, but that will be limited too. So it will have an impact. We'll have to prioritize our goals and focus our energy in the areas of greatest need.
Thank you. So would that, so so professional development, if it stays with the cut, which I guess the number stays the same, how would that look for the days in the calendar? Would we adjust that?
No, I don't think we'd need to adjust the days in the calendar, but we're going to have to approach the work differently, is what it will mean. So, the days in the calendar that we have are, we'll look at those a little bit differently. When we think about our release days, those are collaborative professional development days. So those are not as dependent on the funding around professional development, but as you heard us talk when we were talking about thinking forward, is that anytime we start something, it's so important that we're able to sustain it in the district and support that so that it continues to grow as before you start to implement something else. So we're going to have to approach the work differently is what we're going to do. And we're very fortunate that we have the staff that we have, and we're going to have to put our heads together and do the best we can with the resources we have.
Any other member of the committee have a question? I'm going to open this up to public comment again. Are there people who would like to address this committee? Same thing. Please come up and state your name, your address. And try to keep your comments to 2 minutes so we can hear from as many people as possible we can.
Elizabeth Nursessian, 466 Merrimack Street. Oh, I get to sit. Oh, wow.
Well, not that you're going to stay up here long, but.
2 minutes.
So one of the things that I just wanted to comment on real quick is the presentation of the budget. I see we have the multi-year comparisons for at a high level, but it would be nice to see 3-year comparisons at the school category so that we can actually see where the salaries and equipment have gone over 3 years. Generally in a budget, you do see a 3-year comparison, so I just think that would be helpful. the high-level district stuff, like the special education budgets, aren't broken out in this at all. It's just a one-liner. And it would be nice to have some additional information to be able to see the breakout of the sped and how we're doing. Because there is pieces in here where we're, adding literacy, cutting, IAs. It would be nice to see that if we could have a real clear picture of what's
What that
going
looks like.
on in special education instead of having it broken out. I understand that the positions are at the school level, but just to be able to see a big picture of what our sped department looks like. I'm also concerned about the legal budget because it seems, and some people I've talked to, we haven't been doing as many mediations as we have in the past. And I'm concerned about, are we going to court more frequently, and is our legal budget going to truly cover that? And in regards to Mr. DeCantor's comment about the people in the city putting up some more funds, I hear what you're saying and talking about things that have not kept up with the rate of inflation, but also for a lot of cities, city residents, their income hasn't kept up with the rate of inflation. So many people have gone many, many years without any kind of a raise. And I know we put in here that our teachers are getting a 3% raise, and that doesn't seem like a lot, but a lot of people don't get any raises. So to talk about going out to the members of the community for more money might not be that real for some people.
To clarify, what I want to say is that the teachers are receiving a 2% increase, but that it bumps to 3% when we're looking at degree and lane changes.
Right, and I understand, and it's contractual, and you have, you have to do that. But what I'm saying is many of our members of the community don't have a contract, and they're not getting anything, and they're trying to live within their own means that have not increased over the years, where, yes, the cost of living has. And then the last thing I just wanted to ask in regards to transportation, as I know that's going out to bid, and there's been some, there's an additional bus in here for $36,000. I am a parent that pays for the bus for her kids, but my child, as I've talked to this with Susan before, cannot stay after school sometimes for extra help or extracurricular activities because there is no late bus at the high school. So I pay for that transportation, and as a result, my child can't necessarily take part in all that the high school has to offer. So I'd really like this committee to consider a late bus for the high school. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Bless you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Megan Kinsey, 1 Griffin Court, and also a city councilor at large. I just have, I don't know if it's a question or comment, but I don't think many people are aware, Nick DeCantor mentioned this, and before I start, to echo Bruce Menon, this is actually news to us, this budget. I don't think that we had prepped for this at all. I started hearing from community members actually before even showing up to this meeting. But we have the ability to tax at 2.5%, as you mentioned. We didn't last year. We were shy of that. And I'm not sure what that was in dollars and cents, and I would love just to actually compare the dollars and cents missing in this budget that is needed for the 7.1 to go level relative to the dollars and cents we left on the table. The city, we didn't tax you up to 2.5%. So we're talking about overrides potentially, but we didn't even go to the full 2.5%. And I'm kind of just curious of the difference in dollars. I don't know what that would have done to this budget.
Just to clarify, Counselor, we did in fact go to 2.5%. What we did was that we covered a piece of that with free cash, which never would have been used for one-time expenses anyway.
Could we have gone to 2.5% and then added in free cash as an extra?
No.
Could we have I just literally want to compare the dollars and cents to it. Could we have taxed fully to 2.5%, then chose to add on free cash?
Into the operating budget?
Yes.
Not good fiscal practice to use one-time funds for, operating expenses that are recurring.
I think I think that's a qualified yes, but I'm not sure.
Could taxing the 2.5% raise the base level on which a raise of 2.5% the following year increase the actual dollars that could have added to our operating budget in the long run?
We taxed at the full 2.5% is what we did, but what we did is we taxed to 1.75%, and then we used free cash to offset that balance so that we could give taxpayers a little bit of relief because of the bump up in the debt exclusion and what they were required to pay in terms of their actual taxes. So we still recovered that level of revenue. Now, whether or not that several $100,000 that we used to offset that impact to taxpayers, the practice in our fiscal budgets and policies is that we don't use free cash for recurring revenues. It's for one-time expenses is what we've used it for.
Okay. So as community members, maybe we can at least commit to getting behind full 2.5% potentially in the future. And then discussions of overrides on top of that can come separate from that, but at least perhaps supporting. I mean, that's the debt exclusion definitely added to your final, you don't have a debt exclusion pocket necessarily in your budget. And, a separate 2.5% tax. But at the end of the day, maybe in the future, supporting and maybe saying so to our city that we fully get behind 2.5% is a starting point. And then override conversations perhaps come from there. All right, thank you. Yes.
You wish me to repeat my name? No. Ralph Orlando, 4 William Hall Drive. I think people can hear better than stand. So, again, it's the school committee members, and you can chime in anytime you want. You can give me the act. So, the first thing that's something I want you to ask yourselves is, when did you see the copy of this budget? That's a very important question, because not only did you just see it tonight, it sounds like you only got, what, about 4 to 6 weeks to act upon it? Many of you have, year after year, talked about budget discussions commencing early. I think this is the latest we've ever seen it. And you know that we've talked about, in October, doing exactly what Mrs. Sarah said. You gotta look at a line item by line item of what you expended, what you actually spent. You're basing next year's budget on the budget from last year. You have to look at what you spent last year. And you have to look line item by line item. For example, that .5 sped teacher and literacy that you put in the middle column, does that equate to an out-of-district fee on the sped side that maybe is a 6-figure number? Do you know the answer to that question? I'd like to know it. That's why you start your budget discussions in October when the agenda has nothing on it. Because now you're rushed. The task force data, you want to see what it was? That was done in 2006. By about 25%, Newburyport was an outlier on fees that they charged. And like it or not, that's where the parking fee came. And we all know what a boon that was. But there are many fees based on that revenue task force, of which Mr. Menon was also a member, that you could just review and take a look at, because you now are facing a position where you've got to act quickly. And when you act quickly, you're going to axe. You can all stand here and say you aren't going to support this budget, but if you don't support the budget, we don't pay for the schools. You're going to have to support the budget. But I want to encourage you that your conversations for the budget need to begin in October when you're finalizing what you have spent the year before. And you need to look at the budget like we did in years past. This document doesn't help very many people, but in the past we would see school by school, line item by line item in big groups. What was spent on technology at the middle school? What was spent on SPED at the middle school? I want to see that again. I can't make heads or tails out of this budget, and I don't think anybody else can. And so I will encourage you to not reinvent the wheel. You know what you need to do. Just do it in October, and you don't need to reinvent the task force. Take a look at the report. I can send you a copy, and see what's on there that might help you.
Thank you. Any other comment? I guess someone has one. Lisa?
Thank you. Lisa Mead, 13 Purchase Street. Good evening, everyone. I guess I have a couple of questions, and I'm glad that the school committee's conversation turned to less of a fait accompli and more of, we really can't support it, what else can we do about it? Because I started to get concerned. If there's not an advocate around this table for our schools in the school committee, then who are you and what are you doing for our kids? And so I started to hear that as we went around the table, and that gave me some encouragement. I guess I had a couple of questions. What's the difference in dollars and cents between the 7.1% budget and the budget that was presented?
About $700,000.
And
Everyone hear that? I said about $700,000.
And so, in your professional opinion, superintendent and your leadership team, does that take us to the first step, because last year didn't do it, does that take us to the first step of what your long-range goals are to accomplish what this system needs incrementally, not all at once, incrementally to provide a balanced and good educational system for our kids?
Yeah, I think it was the beginning of where the leadership team felt that we needed to go. It set the stage. It moved us forward.
And so I would hope that the city and the school committee starts to look at ways to get us closer to the 7%. I don't know that you can find $700,000 for sure, but maybe you can get closer to the 7%. I guess I would have some questions about that. One, that Counselor Megan Kinsey brought up, and that is that we actually tax the full 2.5% this year. There was money left on the table last year. That meant that we feel it again this year, because when you tax the full 2.5%, you get to tax on that full amount the next year. So when you leave money on the table, you don't get to tax that full amount the next year. You're only stuck with a percentage of what you could have. And so I would strongly urge that the city consider taxing the full 2.5% this year and not just a portion of it. Certainly, I agree with the mayor that you shouldn't take free cash and put it into an operating budget. That doesn't make any kind of fiscal sense whatsoever. The next question is, does this budget include the ongoing maintenance of the Brown School?
No.
No.
That's been turned over to the city now?
Yes.
Yes.
Is the school committee's taken the vote to turn that building over?
No, but we've just picked it up anyway.
So
City is paying for it.
so there's no money in this budget for the Brown School?
There is not.
And again, I would respectfully suggest to the mayor that actually the money from the Kelly School would go into the general fund, and not to pay off, that's not required to pay off debt. And then, of course, the appropriation from the general fund would come from the mayor and the city council. And while it's true that it won't be available, and again, it's true it's a one-time revenue source, it does go into the general fund. It is not required to be used to pay off debt. And I guess the last thing I would say is there was a number of us last year that sat around this table over in the cafeteria and suggested respectfully that this city needed an override for the operations of its schools, as hard as that is. And we were resoundingly put aside and said that the city wouldn't support it. They had already been asked for money to do it, and despite a number of our efforts, it was clear that there was not going to be any support for that. And it's really too bad that we're 12 months down the road and we're still having the same conversation. And I hope that this changes a bunch of folks' mind about that, and the idea that we really need to get behind that as opposed to continuing debt exclusions to pile on expenses for our taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Anything further? Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Where do we go from here? We have a public hearing on the budget scheduled on April 28th. I I guess we need a plan as to what's gonna occur in the next 3 weeks. Mayor?
Would it be possible for us to get would it be possible for us to receive a summary of revenue spent to date, per teachers in each of the schools, so that we can
Absolutely.
make that kind of comparison?
Yes.
Because we do this all the time when we work on the city budget too. We present to the city council where we are in spending as of the beginning of May. And I think that can help us too, as we sort of look across and begin to analyze what you've presented to us tonight in terms of, I know that you've combed over this budget. We've had several conversations about this. I know, how many times you've gone over this budget and looked at it, but I still think another set of eyes and a group of us looking at that and looking at revenues there and expenditures to date, we might be able to, sort of come up with a couple other suggestions at this point. And the other piece, I just wanted to say that even though our grant writer is 20 hours a week, she still has been working with the schools writing grants and can kick that up too. So in terms of working with you, in terms of any of the grants, that should come. But again, grants are also diminished also. We're seeing cuts from DESE and other grants that we had received in the past too. But certainly we can at least try to increase that, those opportunities whenever there's a chance to.
If I could ask, has a decision been made by your administration with regard to the tax rate?
Tax rates decided in November.
So has a decision been made whether we'll be taxed up to the 2.5%?
For next year, next
Yeah.
November. The only reason we did it the last 2 years was because we hadn't dropped down on the debt exclusion. We were still having the impact of the police station and the library, and working with our bond counsel and our financial advisors, recommended to us that we could do a tax smoothing year. We did that for 2 years, and we're done.
So we can anticipate we're going to tax up to the full 2.5%?
Yes.
It's helpful, thank you.
Question remains, what is our strategy? Where do we go? What do we want to do? I guess I'm gonna push us because
Sure.
it's 3 weeks.
Yeah, I need to see a budget. I would like to see a budget that I can vote for affirmatively. I haven't seen it yet. So whatever conversations need to take place, whether that's between us and the city, that's us looking back inside of this, looking at what our expenses have been, anything that can lead, looking at the revenue task force, anything between now and that drop dead date before we have to spit the budget out. And I don't see that drop dead date being the hearing and a vote immediately afterwards. I want to take the amount of time, we've spent years digging this hole, and if we have to spend right up until we drop dead to try to find a way out of it, I think we should have those conversations. So I'm in favor of all of those conversations, whether they occur here, whether they occur with city councilors. I'm amenable to whatever time it takes, aside from the 2 weeks, then we'll be gone.
Thank you. Mr. DeCanto.
It seems to me that this is an issue that will need some research, and when we talk about researching into budgets and how they're being put together on the school side, we have a finance committee that probably should be working overtime to work on it, but I would say mostly I would look to try and ask the joint ed committee to get together, maybe spend a Saturday morning together, the way we've done with the policy committee on occasion, to really crank through some work and get some time dedicated and identify what the opportunities are for us to close that gap. And what can we do about them in a way that it's not us doing something in one silo and then going back to the city council to see what they're coming up with in their silo, but in a collaborative basis saying, hey, I think it's very clear from the comments that have gone around here that we have an issue. And it's not a school issue alone, it is a school issue, it is a city issue, and that's why I think the Joint Ed Committee, I would hope that we would ask the chair of the Joint Ed Committee to put some time into this and be certainly, I'm sure that any member of the school committee would step up and do whatever legwork is necessary to help make that happen.
Once Passover is done, Nick will buy the bagels for a Saturday morning event, I'm sure.
I will. I'll invest in bagels for our schools.
Anything further on the budget? I think it's prudent to say that the FinCom subcommittee, Mr. Cole, I would like you to schedule a meeting as soon as we possibly can get together to talk further about this and perhaps plan some strategies for the rest of the committee.
Okay. I mean, if I can just throw this out, one thing I would foresee is during the week of April 13th, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to the 16th, I'd like to suggest that we perhaps get 2 workshop-style meetings in, and between now and that time, we'll try to map out some strategies to review some of the things that have been mentioned tonight, and include information that people can review and come to those meetings prepared with.
Thank you. Anything further? Superintendent, is there anything you'd like to add to that strategy?
Nope.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe. Why don't we take a couple of minutes and we'll kind of clear the room and then go on to our next agenda item, if that's all right? We're gonna have a break right now, yes.
Nancy, good job.
two policies, one, animals in school, and the second, the charging of school lunch milk. So I'm going to turn that over to the policy chair, Mr. Decanter.
Thank you, Cheryl. For your, as a first reading, the policy committee has gone through a couple of policies that the superintendent felt were necessary because situations were presenting themselves. And the first one on the agenda here is animals in school. This really came up for us to have some policy guidelines in place that the school department can refer to and live with in terms of how and when we bring animals into the school. And in this case, we're looking at a teacher who has it's a therapy dog officially. It's a therapy
Skipper.
dog, not a service dog.
Skipper. I love
Therapy
him. He's so
dog.
cute. He's in the paper.
He's wonderful. And this has not been something that is new. We have had animals in our schools before. We had a very successful program funded by the Education Business Coalition a couple of years back, which is called Reading to Rover, that would help shy students get over their shyness and read aloud. It basically, the policy that we picked up was one that was developed through MASC, and we basically have touched it up a little bit to fit the needs of our district, and we wanted to bring it before you so that you have a chance to read it, look at it, give us any comments you may have, and then we'll bring it back for a second reading and approval. Any questions on that policy?
That's about the
animals in the school.
Okay. Do you know, I guess one of the things I'd like to know is, the animal, the dog, does the dog have a special type of hypoallergenic?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because that's really important.
Yep.
I'll just share a quick story with you. I was a residential program director a number of years ago, and I had one of my staff bring a child with a severe allergy to dogs into Mass General Allergy Clinic. And much to my chagrin, about 3 days later, I got this letter addressed to me because the staff had told the doc that she brings her dog into the residence. And the doc wrote me a letter, basically chastised me up and down, threatened me with neglect because of the severity that that child could have had a reaction to the dog here. So ever since then, whenever I hear about dogs in school around kids, I just need to ask that question. So provided that's the case and we're not going to put any kids at risk, I think it's a really good thing.
So please take a look at it, and if you have any questions, please forward it to the superintendent and me via email, and we will make sure that we get put in. Yes, go ahead.
Are these changes to existing?
These
These
are
are
new policies.
brand new policies, both
Brand new
of them?
policies.
Okay,
Yes, indeed.
okay.
The second policy that's before you is a policy on charging of school lunch and/or milk. Basically, and understandably, we have a policy of not letting our children go hungry in school. If they come and they either don't have lunch money, they forgot their lunch at home, and/or they don't have lunch credits available to them, we will feed them. And what this does is begin to put some structure around that policy so that we will say, okay, we will feed them, but only up to a certain point, and then what happens? How do we reach out? Who is responsible for reaching out to the parents to try and collect that money that the kids have, at this point, so happily eaten? What happens if we can't collect? And yet again, we won't let them go hungry, but we will limit their choices in terms of what they can order for lunch in those cases. And so that's what this policy is all about. It explains step by step who is responsible for what aspect, what the food services responsibilities are, and what our responsibilities are. That is in an effort to collect money that otherwise would go uncollected for people who had lunches at school. It is slightly different at the high school. That was the only point that we should probably make. The amount that we're talking about is allowing a child to rack up before we start contacting their parent or guardian is $10, and after that, that can be extended another $5 while that process is being cleaned up. In the middle of May, all charging will be cut off, so that we're not stuck at the end of the year chasing additional money if people haven't gotten into the habit of charging by that point, or of paying by that point. We've got some serious issues, so hopefully that won't be a big issue at that point. And what else did I have in that, or did we have in that policy? No à la carte items will be charged. And then high school students, of course, one of the ways to make sure they pay is make sure that they don't get their cap and gown until such time as they pay. Which is consistent with policies that I believe we have in terms of textbooks and other things we need them to return.
I don't know if you covered it, and please excuse me if you did. Tell me about the little first grader that's in the lunch line hungry with no money.
We feed him, or her.
No matter what?
Yeah.
Till the end?
No, we feed them, and then we reach out to their parents and guardians and try and recover, and we have a conversation, and that's part of what we establish here, who has a conversation with the parents and guardians at what point in time.
Okay.
Which has been kind of fuzzy up to this point, and therefore we haven't been recovering this money as well as we might.
So the child in the line won't be identified at all?
Absolutely
No,
not.
Not, okay, you go over here for your cheese sandwich today?
No.
Because I've seen that happen other places.
No. Ideally it's,
I have.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I
So I
grew
did-
up
I-
on free lunches, and we had a separate line.
Right.
We had to wait till everybody else was finished.
That's right, and you were, and in the district I was in, the only option was a cheese sandwich.
Yeah.
That was it.
And tomato soup.
So I just want to safeguard the
Well,
child, that's all.
Once they've racked up their $15 and the parents are non-responsive and stuff like that, that might be the route we have to take with the child, is to give them the more limited budget, the less expensive, more limited option at that point. But it will be done in a way that doesn't call out the student or as
No, I'm
as delinquent.
sure of that, I just didn't want there to be anything
At
going
least that's our intent.
in the lunchroom that the kids would know.
Yeah.
Okay. And this requires a vote?
It will require a vote, because it is a new policy that we're adopting.
And then at the next meeting, do you expect to vote on both issues?
That is correct.
And do we have all the information we need to make those determinations? Do you
I would
feel?
hope so, and if you don't, please ask.
Thank you. Anybody have a question about the two new policies? Mr. Cole?
Yeah, just about this milk, lunch and milk policy. Given that the top line talks about extending a courtesy, can we call on, down the bottom on item C, rather than offense, can we call it a second credit transaction instead? I just find that, again, after a second offense.
After a second offense?
Yeah, I would just call it a second credit transaction. Especially, okay.
I don't have any problem with it.
That's fine.
What section is that, C?
C.
C.
Under
3C. 3C.
Okay, thank you.
Although I'm not sure transaction is quite the word, because you might have a couple of transactions to get to your $10 level initially.
Well, why is it referred to as a second, why is it used second?
After the nominal amount exceeds the second. We've talked to them about 10, and they keep charging, and we've got about $5 additional dollars. So maybe the way I would handle it is after the nominal amount exceeds $15. That way we're not calling it offense, and we're still getting it the same amount. Do you agree with that, Susan?
It's a nicer word.
I do.
So after the nominal amount exceeds $15.
Thank you.
I like that even better.
Yeah,
I concur.
Thank you, and we will see you back on these two next meeting.
28. Big night.
Well,
Superintendent's report?
There's just a couple of things that I want to bring you up. I have extended the invitation out to members of the community and to the staff regarding strategic planning, and I'm starting to hear from people on that. Again, that's going to be May 20th, 21st, and 22nd. And I just wanted to inform you of the partnerships with higher education. Salem State has brought forward a proposal to offer a class in the fall, which students would pay a fee, but they would receive dual credit. Mr. Parent was sent 4 different choices, all pretty interesting choices. So he was taking a look at that, and I also...
And that class would be taught here?
It would be taught here, correct. And
During the day or after?
in the evening. In the evening. And our students would, as I said, receive dual credit, but they would only have to pay the school fee. There would be no charge for the class itself. So that's very good news for our students. And then I'm also have partnered with Endicott, and we're looking to do some more work with them. I will be actually next week, we'll be doing some mock interviews with some of their education majors who are graduating, and they are planning to send some student teachers and some of their interns to us beginning in the fall. So I'm pleased that we are going to be able to partner with both of those institutions, and we're working on a few other things with some other institutions as well. So it's positive for our students, and certainly for our staff as well. So it bodes well for us. So that's really it.
Thank you. Subcommittee reports. We canceled the joint ed subcommittee meeting for this evening, and instead I invited the city councilors who were on the joint ed committee to join us during our meeting, and they did that with a couple of other friends in tow. So that was a nice thing. I felt that we couldn't disclose all the ramifications of the budget before it was presented to our own committee, so I asked them to join us for this evening's meeting. Let's see. CPAC? Have you had a meeting, or the CPAC committee?
Oh, CPAC, sorry, I thought you said feedback, and I'm thinking
Oh,
feedback about
she said, why is she looking at me?
I know, and I'm like, what?
I'm sorry. It's
Yeah.
the Special Education Parent Advisory Council.
One was canceled, and then I believe there was one in March.
Was canceled, and they're meeting Thursday night.
Okay. I was aware.
And I'm a guest, I'm invited.
This Thursday night?
Yes.
Okay.
Indicted or invited?
Invited.
Wow.
All right.
The Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Subcommittee?
We held our last meeting jointly with the Finance Committee. And the next meeting for that committee is scheduled for the 3rd Tuesday in April, if we, it's scheduled for the 3rd Tuesday in April.
And we're anticipating we may need to manipulate that
Well,
based on...
we had talked about using the last month and this month to combine the CIA meeting and the Finance Committee meeting, because we wanted to use the agendas for both meetings to talk about, curriculum-related priorities as far as the budget goes. So I think, given the conversation tonight, I would recommend potentially using that meeting time as a budget discussion rather than a CIA meeting. So, there is a standing time each month set aside for the CIA meeting. That time could be used for the discussions on the budget with the members of that subcommittee or the school committee as a whole. So that would be my recommendation going forward, because if we're talking about curriculum at this point in the school year, we're talking about curriculum as it relates to the budget for next year. So,
Michael, what was that date?
it's let's see, it's on
April 23rd, 21st, I'm sorry, Tuesday, April 21st.
That's right.
In the central office. We're also scheduled for a FinCom meeting. We canceled the, Mr. Cole, can you update us on the Finance Committee?
Yeah, we met last,
Canceled.
we had it early. We decided to meet last week. on April Fool's Day, wasn't it?
I think it was.
And we had our first look at the revenue expenses as presented tonight, not the exact same numbers, but, and we were instructed that until those numbers were finalized, because Susan still had to meet with the leadership team, that those would not be available until that leadership team met. So as a result, people received those budgets today. We also talked about enrollment. We tried to take a look at enrollment in terms of looking ahead toward when there's a possibility of opening up choice. Took a look at different cohorts and, you know, the variation of those cohorts. For instance, in, I believe, the current year, we have a grade 2 class of 144, whereas we have a grade 3 class of 179. So just to talk about the differences, and Ms. Lysick actually did some research and showed how in a typical school year, how much, or for a typical grade, how much that changes from kindergarten to grade 12. So we're going to take a close look at that, because we just want to be aware of what the potential variability is over time, how many more kids could come into this district. We may not see it, we may not be able to predict it demographically, but if people move in, they enroll, it's going to show up in those types of numbers. So we're going to keep a close eye on that. Susan also filled us in on what she mentioned before about the plans to collaborate with Salem State, Endicott College, as well as Merrimack College. And we did approve a transfer that the City Council voted on the other night to transfer $25,000 to the school lunch revolving. And we also did some site-to-site transfers of special ed monies, supplies and materials from the Bresnahan to, what does SW stand for?
System-wide.
System-wide, thank you. So from Bresnahan supplies and materials to system-wide contracted services, $5,400. Mullen supplies and materials, sped to system-wide contracted services, $1,700. And there's no school indicated there. Oh, it's the same one. It's another one from Mullen School, $3,000 from to system-wide contracted services, $842 from high school supplies and materials to, again, system-wide contracted services, and $2,500 from high school special ed supplies and materials to system-wide special ed materials. And that was basically to just meet some needs in the special ed department for those areas. So those were all.
And was that about $10,000?
Altogether? Let's see, 72, 10
Not
to
much to spend
11, about 13.5.
Okay, thank you. Any questions about that? Two things I'd like to remind you of. The school committee retreat is set for Wednesday evening, April 8th at 5:30 in the superintendent's conference room, and the topic will be the structure of the superintendent's evaluation for this year. As you know, we need to finish our evaluation of the superintendent by the beginning of June, so that we're timely with our contracts for July 1st. I'd also like to remind people that Newburyport says no to prejudice. The public forum is tomorrow evening, starting at 7 p.m. It'll be held in the Knockmolin Library, and I am...
It's actually going to be held in the auditorium.
Oh,
They've switched it
sorry.
to the auditorium.
Big crowd.
Can I also add to that, based on some feedback I got from a parent, that we are encouraging students to attend as well. That somehow that wasn't clear, at least to this parent.
Cheryl, what was the date of the retreat?
Wednesday the 7th.
Thank you.
8th. Sorry, I can't find it. Why do I have April 7th?
That's
for the
forum tomorrow.
CDT.
Sorry. Is there anything further from anyone? Could I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, everyone.